On the night of my birthday, my husband, who worked as a contractor for a highly classified defense intelligence agency, sent me a Zelle transfer for $5,000. Baby, an emergency came up at the agency. I'm stuck working late. I am so sorry I can't be there to celebrate with you. The notification glowed on my screen. And in that exact moment, I was standing in the shadowed alcove of my own corporate building's lobby, watching him walk through the revolving glass doors. His arm was wrapped tightly around his adopted sister. This is the last time I'm giving in to you. I heard him murmur, his voice echoing faintly against the marble walls. Next year, no matter what, I'm spending her birthday with her. Madison, his adopted sister, leaned into his side with a breathy, saccharine laugh, holding up a sleek, silver box of ultra-thin condoms. Our very first time was in your company's executive boardroom, she whispered, tracing his jawline. It's only poetic that our last time happens in the exact same place. My fingers tightened around my paper coffee cup until the cardboard buckled. The iced latte inside suddenly felt like battery acid in my veins. Pulling out my phone, I drafted an emergency email to my executive team, excluding only Madison, who officially worked in our marketing department. Urgent. The client has moved up the contract signing. All department heads, meet in the main executive boardroom in 20 minutes. If they wanted a thrill, I thought, my heart beating a slow, hollow rhythm against my ribs. If they wanted a show, I was about to give them a finale they would never, ever forget. Hey Dave, can you remotely access the dome camera in the main executive boardroom from the back end? Yes, exactly. I want to make sure we capture this historic signing on tape. Great, just route the live feed to my phone, please. Hanging up, I opened the security application on my phone, my fingers trembling so badly I almost dropped the device. The live feed buffered, then snapped into crisp, high-definition color. The exact spot where Harry and Madison were currently writhing against each other was dead center of the massive mahogany conference table, right beneath the unblinking eye of the camera. Harry, Madison purred, her voice tinny but clear through the audio feed. What do you think Caroline would do if she knew that every single year, the birthday lingerie you buy her is something I've already broken in for you? She arched her back, and the camera caught the unmistakable scalloped edges of a black La Perlissette. Do you think she'd thank me for test driving it? Recognizing the delicate lace, the exact brand and style Harry gifted me every single birthday, a scalding heat flooded my eyes. My stomach pitched violently, the world tilting on its axis as bile rose hot and sharp in the back of my throat. I had to brace my hand against the cold plaster wall just to stay upright. We had been married for 6 years. And for 6 years, on every single birthday, he had found an excuse to be absent. I had always given him the benefit of the doubt. His work in defense intelligence was strictly confidential. He couldn't control his hours. Or so I thought. I couldn't have imagined, even in my darkest nightmares, that every time I sat alone in our dimly lit dining room, blowing out my candles and wishing for a long, happy life with my husband, he was locked inside my company's boardroom with his adopted sister, desecrating every vow we had ever made. A frigid draft swept through the corridor, making me shiver uncontrollably. Ms. Brooks? I jumped, turning to see my executive assistant standing a few feet away, accompanied by a small camera crew. The PR team and the corporate videographer are here, she said, oblivious to the earthquake happening inside my chest. With this live stream, our shareholders and the public will see us finalize the strategic partnership with Carmichael Industries in real time. It's going to be a massive PR win for our stock. I forced the corners of my mouth up into a smile. Taking the bottle of water, she offered to wash the bitter taste from my mouth. Keep the camera discreet for now, I instructed, my voice eerily calm. We go live in 15 seconds. And no matter what happens in that room, the stream does not cut. Understood? With the stage set, I led my team toward the private executive elevators to wait for our VIPs. Harry's father, Arthur Cole, a major shareholder. My own father, Richard Brooks, and our billionaire client, Victor Carmichael. When the elevator doors chimed and slid open, I plastered on my best professional warmth. Dad, Victor. Right this way. But as we stepped off the elevator and approached the boardroom wing, the pristine hallway told a different story. A pale blue women's blazer lay crumpled on the carpet. Without missing a beat, I bent down, picking it up and draping it over my arm. A few steps later, 2 5-inch Louboutin stilettos lay violently discarded near the wall. And hanging off the heavy brass handle of the boardroom door, a single sheer black stocking. As I feigned shock, clumsily trying to gather the trail of discarded clothes, the 3 older men stopped dead in their tracks. They looked at the messy bundle in my arms, then at me, dressed impeccably in my tailored trousers and silk blouse. Victor Carmichael cleared his throat, an uncomfortable, amused smile playing on his lips. Well, making your employees work on a Friday night is a bit draconian, Caroline. I hope us old men aren't interrupting some young executives blowing off steam. By now, the rest of my staff had arrived via the main elevators, congregating behind us in the corridor. I forced a tight, embarrassed laugh, shaking my head. I pressed my hand flat against the heavy double doors of the boardroom and pushed with all my might. Let's see what kind of scandal we're walking into, shall we? But before the door could swing fully open, someone shoved it back from the inside. Harry slipped through the narrow gap, his tie entirely gone, his dress shirt misbuttoned and untucked. His face flushed a deep, feverish red, drained of all color the second he saw the crowd. Dad. And Mr. Brooks? He stammered, his eyes darting wildly. Isn't today Friday? What are you all doing here? Then his gaze dropped to the shredded black stocking in my hand. He looked past me, realizing there were nearly 50 employees standing in the hallway, phones buzzing, whispers erupting. In a display of sheer, unadulterated audacity, Harry stepped forward and pulled me into a tight embrace, his hands gripping my waist like a vice. Caroline, honey, he said, his voice dripping with forced affection. Why didn't you tell me you had a meeting? He ducked his head, pressing his mouth so close to my ear I could smell the sweat and sex on his skin. Everyone is looking, he hissed, his tone desperate. Play along. It's not what you think. I will explain everything later. Feeling the frantic thud of his heart against my chest, a wave of profound physical revulsion washed over me. I shoved hard against his chest, breaking the embrace. I apologize, gentlemen. How unprofessional of us, I said loudly, projecting my voice. Dad, Arthur, why don't you take Victor to the VIP lounge for a few minutes? I'll have maintenance clear the room, and we will begin the signing in 5 minutes. Harry let out a breath he'd been holding, his shoulders dropping in relief. But the relief made him cocky. Instantly, his tone shifted from pleading to patronizing. Caroline, what has gotten into you? He scolded, playing the role of the rational husband. You can't make Victor wait. Doesn't this floor have that smaller conference room down the hall? Let's just use that one for tonight. He shot a panicked, meaningful look at his father. Arthur Cole, a man who had built his fortune on reading between the lines and burying bodies, caught the look immediately. Yes, exactly. Arthur chimed in smoothly, stepping forward. Harry is right. The small room will do just fine. He practically bowed as he reached out to shake Victor's hand. My apologies, Victor. You know how disorganized the younger generation can be. Let's head this way. He was trying to herd everyone away. He wanted to clear the hallway so Madison, who was undoubtedly still trapped inside the main boardroom, naked and terrified, could make her escape. Not a chance in hell. Arthur, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. I can forgive Harry for not knowing the layout of our office, considering he doesn't work here. But surely you know better. I gestured to the sea of employees behind me. The small boardroom holds 20 people. There are over 50 department heads and staff members here. Are we supposed to have them stand in the hallway during a multi-million-dollar merger? I turned to Harry, a sweet, poisoned smile on my face. Honestly, Harry, I work a late shift, change into something comfortable, and ask you to put my clothes away when you drop by to visit. And you just leave them scattered in the hall. You're giving everyone the wrong idea. I linked my arm through Victor Carmichael's. Victor, let's head inside. I promised my team triple overtime for this sudden Friday night pivot. If I delay them any longer, I'm going to have a mutiny on my hands. As the crowd surged forward toward the main doors, Harry threw his body in front of the handle, his eyes wild with terror. Caroline, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Just listen to me. Use the other room, please. My father, Richard, wasn't an idiot. Watching my sudden, icy demeanor and Harry's manic desperation, the pieces clicked together in his mind. His face darkened into a thundercloud. Arthur, my father barked, looking at Harry's dad. What the hell is going on in that room that your boy is so terrified of us seeing? Without waiting for an answer, my father grabbed Harry by the shoulder, shoved him aside, and threw open the boardroom doors. He marched inside, the lights automatically flickering on. All this sneaking around. My father boomed. If I didn't know better, I'd say the boy had a woman hidden in. His voice died in his throat. Right in the center of the polished mahogany table lay a crumpled bra and a torn pair of lace panties. My father didn't hesitate. He spun around, grabbed Harry by the lapels, and drove his fist straight into Harry's jaw. The crack echoed through the room as Harry hit the floor. You son of a bitch, my dad roared, kicking Harry hard in the ribs. You actually dared to cheat on my daughter? Who is it? Who's the whore you've got in here? My dad pointed a shaking finger at the pile of clothes I had collected. I knew the second the elevator doors opened. That blazer, those heels, Caroline wouldn't be caught dead in that trashy garbage. He reached for his jacket buttons, ready to drop down and beat Harry into a pulp, but Arthur grabbed him, pulling him back. Richard, wait. Don't do this here. Arthur pleaded. Harry scrambled backward, blood dripping from his lip. He grabbed the underwear off the table and blindly reached under a nearby chair, pulling out a pink Victoria's Secret shopping bag. Dad, Mr. Brooks, you've got it all wrong. Harry cried, his voice shrill. It's a gift. I bought it for Caroline for her birthday. It fell out of the bag, and I hadn't picked it up yet. He looked up at me, his eyes begging me to throw him a lifeline. Tell them, Caroline. Tell them. Haven't I bought you a set just like this every year for the past 6 years? The sheer, breathtaking cowardice of the man I married made my skin crawl. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. I calmly walked over, took the crumpled lace from his shaking hands, and dropped it into the nearest trash can, along with the heels and the blazer. Dad, stop. He's telling the truth. I lied smoothly. I instructed the bewildered staff to take their seats. As they filed in, I let my eyes sweep the massive room. I was hunting. Madison had to be completely naked right now. The room was sleek, modern, minimal. The only place big enough to hide a human body was under the massive oak table. But when Harry had dropped to the floor to grab the bag, I had already checked the sightlines beneath the chairs. Nothing. There was only one other place. In the far corner of the room sat our industrial-grade architectural plotter and printer, a machine the size of a small car, with a massive hollow storage chassis at the bottom meant for spare toner and oversized paper rolls. To test my theory, I casually walked toward the corner, pretending to examine the thermostat on the wall near the printer. Instantly, a cold sweat broke out on Harry's forehead. He lunged out of his chair, grabbing my elbow with a bruising grip. Caroline, he said rapidly, his eyes dilated. Did you get the Venmo I sent you? The $5,000? What money? I asked, playing dumb and reaching for my phone. He snatched my hand away. Never mind. Just look at it later. Let's get through this meeting, and then I'm taking you out. You wanted to go to that rooftop restaurant to see the fireworks, right? We'll go tonight. Just the two of us. I forced a smile, looking deeply into his panicked eyes. Okay. I was certain now. Madison was curled up inside the belly of that printer. I turned back to the table and signaled for my assistant to pause. Victor, I am so sorry, I announced loudly. There is a glaring typo on page 4 of the financial disclosures. It's an unacceptable oversight by my team, and it will be dealt with. I looked at my assistant. I need 10 minutes. Have someone print a fresh, corrected copy of the contract right now. Use the machine in the corner. No. The shout came from both Harry and his father simultaneously. No. I thought, a cold, dead calm settling over my heart. I don't think you get a say in this anymore. I knew Arthur. I knew he had recognized Madison's blazer in the hallway. I knew he had put the pieces together. The only reason he was playing along, pretending this was just a misunderstanding, was because he assumed I would protect the family's reputation. He assumed I was a good, compliant wife who would rather swallow glass than cause a public scandal. What neither of them understood was that beneath my polished exterior, I was uncompromising. If you crossed my bottom line, I would burn the earth to ash to make you pay. I shot a subtle, loaded look at my father. He read my face instantly. Victor, don't worry, my dad stepped in, his voice booming with authority. We will have the corrected documents in your hands in less than 10 minutes. Arthur stepped forward, his face pale and sweating. Is that the only printer in the building? He snapped at my assistant. Go use the one in marketing. You're going to disturb Victor with that loud machine in here. Arthur frantically poured a glass of water, offering it to Victor with a shaky hand. Kids these days, Victor. No sense of decorum. Forgive them. My assistant froze, looking at me for direction. My father leaned back in his leather chair, crossing his arms. He looked at Arthur with a predatory smirk. Arthur, why are you sweating? It's just a printer. I tilted my head, adopting a look of innocent confusion. Honestly, Harry, you and your dad are acting so bizarrely tonight. Is there something you're hiding from me? I crossed my arms, subtly angling my body so the videographer's camera had a clear, unobstructed shot of the machine. Are you really hiding a woman in here, like my dad said? I teased, walking in a slow circle around the room. But where would she be? The room is practically empty. I stopped directly in front of the massive printer, staring at the ventilation grates on the lower housing. It's not like she could fit inside the paper tray, right? Arthur's face turned a sickly shade of gray. Harry held his hands up, his voice cracking with hysteria. I swear to God, Caroline, I haven't betrayed you. You're taking this joke too far. Victor is our most important client. You're being incredibly disrespectful. He was still trying to gaslight me. He was still banking on my obedience. If Arthur and Harry were so determined to bury their heads in the sand, I was going to force their hand. Madison had two choices. 1, she could push the hatch open, crawl out completely naked in front of 50 people and a live streaming camera, and admit to the world that she had been sleeping with her adoptive brother. 2, she could stay inside the machine. And when the massive industrial gears and rollers fired up, she could see how much pressure human bone could take. I stared into Arthur's eyes, entirely deadpan. 3 minutes have passed, I said coldly. Victor has a 9 o'clock flight back to New York. The silence that followed my words was thick, heavy, and smelling faintly of ozone from the idle electronics in the corner. Victor Carmichael adjusted his gold watch, his gray eyes shifting from me to the massive, silver and black architectural plotter in the corner. 9 o'clock. Sharp, Caroline, he murmured, his voice carrying the effortless authority of a Man who bought and sold logistics companies for breakfast. And my pilots are notoriously strict about their runway slots. It won't take more than 5 minutes, Victor, I said, my voice steady, devoid of the tremors that had threatened to tear me apart only minutes prior. I turned to my executive assistant, Sarah. Sarah, please send the revised financial annex directly to the local spooler. Use the heavy bond high gloss roll. We want the client to have the highest quality draft. Sarah, whose loyalty was backed by a very generous discretionary bonus structure I had personally approved last quarter, didn't hesitate. Her fingers danced across her tablet. Sending now, Ms. Brooks. It's a 60-page document. High-density color. No. Harry's voice was too high, a desperate, scraping sound that rattled against the glass walls of the boardroom. He took a step toward Sarah, his hands outstretched as if he could physically snatch the digital packets out of the air. Sarah, stop. Don't print that. The color calibration is off. It'll ruin the paper. It'll clog the jets. Harry, my father said, his voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. Didn't move from his seat at the head of the table, but his knuckles, still raw and reddened from where he had struck Harry's jaw, tightened. Since when do you give directives to our administrative staff? Sit down before I have security assist you. Arthur Cole stepped between my father and Harry, his hands raised in a placating gesture that looked entirely hollow. Richard, please. Let's not let a minor domestic misunderstanding ruin a $20 million partnership. Harry is just stressed. It's Caroline's birthday after all. He probably wanted to get her out of here to celebrate. Right, Harry? Arthur's eyes were practically drilling holes into his son's skull, begging him to play the part of the repentant, overeager husband. But Harry was looking at the plotter. The machine let out a low, deep growl as its internal vacuum seal activated. The digital display on the plotter's interface blinked, transitioning from a soft blue sleep mode to a harsh, bright white. Job received. Financial _annex _v4 final.pdf. A heavy thud echoed from inside the machine's chassis. It was subtle, masked by the initial spin-up of the internal exhaust fans, but to anyone paying close attention, it was the sound of shifting weight. A human body, tightly curled, trying desperately to find a pocket of space away from the moving mechanical parts. The plotter's internal heating element clicked on. To cure high-density ink on heavy bond paper, the machine utilized a series of high-intensity infrared lamps that reached temperatures upwards of 200 degrees Fahrenheit within 90 seconds. The heating lamps are warming up, Sarah announced, her eyes fixed on her tablet. Spooling is at 12%. Caroline, Harry whispered, stepping close enough that I could see the tiny, frantic pulse throbbing in his temple. His lip was swollen, a thin smear of blood drying on his chin. Please. I'll sign whatever you want. The post-nup. The house. Just tell her to cancel the print job. You don't know what you're doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, Harry, I said, looking him dead in the eye. I didn't whisper. I wanted the microphone on the videographer's shoulder to catch every syllable. I'm correcting a mistake. Isn't that what we do when things get messy? We clean them up. The plotter let out a sharp, mechanical clack. The feed rollers, solid steel bars wrapped in high-grip vulcanized rubber, began to rotate. They spun with immense torque, designed to pull heavy 300-foot rolls of paper through the printing carriage without slipping. A muffled, choked gasp escaped from the lower compartment of the machine. Arthur Cole's face went entirely white. He knew the structural design of that printer. His own firm had drafted the facility's layout for our marketing wing 3 years ago. He knew that the storage compartment beneath the paper rollers was barely 3 feet wide, insulated with heavy sound-dampening foam, and directly adjacent to the main drive belts and the ventilation exhaust for the heating lamps. It was a metal coffin with a 3-digit safety latch that could only be opened easily from the outside. Stop the machine, Arthur said, his voice no longer smooth. It was a flat, desperate command. Richard, tell your daughter to stop the machine right now. This is madness. My father didn't move. He looked at Arthur, then at the printer, and then at me. In that moment, the 60 years of corporate warfare my father had survived showed in his eyes. He didn't know exactly who was inside that printer, but he knew the leverage was absolute. The print job is already underway, Arthur, my father said, leaning back and taking a slow sip of his water. And Victor has a plane to catch. Whir. The carriage belt engaged. The heavy print head, weighing nearly 15 pounds, began its rhythmic, violent sweeps across the metal platen. Swoosh-clack. Swoosh-clack. With every sweep, a blast of hot, dry air was forced downward by the exhaust fans into the lower storage chassis. Then came the scream. It wasn't a loud scream at first, more of a panicked, suffocating yelp of someone whose skin had just made contact with a hot metal pipe. But as the print head swept a third time, releasing a cloud of vaporized chemical ink and another wave of dry heat, the lower metal hatch of the plotter buckled outward. "Get me out! Harry, get me out!" The voice was muffled, distorted by the metal casing, but there was no mistaking the high, frantic pitch. It was Madison, the 50 department head standing in the hallway, whose murmurs had been a low hum of curiosity, went dead silent. The corporate videographer, a young man named Leo whom I had personally hired for his quick reflexes, didn't lower his camera. In fact, he stepped slightly to the left, capturing both the buckling hatch of the printer and the frozen, horrified expressions of Harry and Arthur. "Cole. My God," Victor Carmichael said, his voice devoid of amusement now. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "What is that?" It's a security test," Harry stammered, his hands flying to his head, tearing at his hair. "It's a drill. Caroline, tell them it's a drill." "Sarah," I said, ignoring my husband entirely. "Why is the machine making that noise? Is there a paper jam?" I think so, Ms. Brooks," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, though she played her part with remarkable composure. "The sensors are reporting an obstruction in the lower paper path. The roller gears are experiencing high resistance." The mechanical sound of the printer changed. The smooth swoosh clack became a wet, grinding struggle. The high-torque steel rollers were catching on something soft, pulling at whatever fabric or hair was pressed against the feeding slit. "Harry, my hair. It's pulling my hair." Madison shrieked, her voice rising to a pitch of pure, unadulterated terror. "Open the door. Arthur, help me." Arthur didn't wait. He abandoned all pretense of dignity, throwing himself toward the printer. He grabbed the plastic safety latch on the lower maintenance hatch, but his hands were sweating so profusely he couldn't get a grip. "Harry, help me. Pull the lever." Harry scrambled forward, but before his fingers could touch the latch, my father's hand clamped down on his collar, throwing him backward onto the floor. With a heavy thud. "You stay right there, boy," my father growled, standing over him like a sentinel. Arthur finally managed to release the latch. With a loud, metallic pop, the lower maintenance door burst open. A cloud of white toner dust and hot, ink-scented steam billowed out into the pristine boardroom. And then, like a creature escaping a shipwreck, Madison Cole tumbled out onto the polished mahogany floor. She was completely naked, save for a scrap of a bright pink promotional t-shirt from our marketing department that she had frantically wrapped around her torso. Her skin was flushed a bright, angry red from the heat, her face streaked with black toner dust and sweat. Her long, bleached blonde hair, the same hair Harry had run his fingers through during our wedding photos, was caught in the lower roller gears, holding her head at an awkward, painful angle against the machine. "Help me," she sobbed, her fingers clawing at the floorboards. "It's burning. My back is burning." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the steady, rhythmic hum of the printer, which had finally registered a critical error and stopped its carriage mid-sweep. Error 03, carriage obstruction. The 50 employees in the hallway didn't whisper anymore. They stood frozen, their eyes wide, their phones held high. The live stream, which was being routed directly to our corporate website and the primary investor relations portal, was broadcasting Madison's tear-streaked, toner-covered face in high-definition 4K. "Madison," Arthur gasped, dropping to his knees and trying to cover her with his suit jacket. "Oh my God, Madison." Victor Carmichael looked down at the girl on the floor, then at Arthur, and finally at Harry, who was curled on the floor near my father's feet, his face buried in his hands. Victor slowly turned his gaze to me. There was no pity in his eyes, only a profound, dark respect. He had spent 40 years in the cutthroat shipping industry, and he knew a bloodletting when he saw one. "Well, Caroline," Victor said softly, fastening the middle button of his suit coat, "it seems your organization has some internal friction to resolve before we can proceed with the signing." "The signing can proceed right now, Victor," I said, my voice cutting through the quiet room like a scalpel. "The corporate entity signing this agreement is Brooks Holdings. Arthur Cole's investment firm was merely a minority facilitator. As of 5 minutes ago, I have exercised the morality clause in our partnership agreement to strip the Cole family of their voting shares." Arthur looked up from his daughter, his eyes wild. "You can't do that. That requires a board majority." "I have the board majority, Arthur," I said, pulling a leather-bound folder from my briefcase and placing it on the table. "My father and I control 51%. And after tonight, I don't think any of our institutional investors will be voting to keep you on the board." I looked down at Madison, who was still whimpering as Arthur tried to gently untangle her hair from the rollers. "Sarah," I said calmly, "call building security. Tell them we have an intruder." in the executive suite who has damaged corporate property. Caroline, please. Harry crawled toward me, his knees dragging across the floor, leaving light smudges of dust on the dark wood. He reached for the hem of my trousers, but I stepped back, letting him grasp empty air. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. I was confused. Madison manipulated me. She's sick. She needs help. Harry, I said, looking down at him with a detachment that surprised even myself. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of waiting up past midnight with a cold dinner. 6 years of convincing myself that his coldness was just the burden of his classified work, shrank down to a tiny insignificant speck. Do you know what the hardest part of tonight was? He stared up at me, his eyes bloodshot, his lips trembling. It wasn't seeing you with her, I said softly. It was realizing how incredibly cheap you are. $5,000 on Zelle? A La Perla set that she broke. And for me? You didn't even have the decency to be creative with your betrayal. You used the exact same script, year after year. I turned to the videographer. Leo, is the stream still active? Yes, Ms. Brooks, Leo said, his voice steady despite the chaos. We currently have 42,000 active viewers on the investor portal. The link was just picked up by a local business news feed. Excellent, I said. Keep it running. I want our shareholders to see that Brooks Holdings does not tolerate liabilities, financial or moral. Caroline, you're destroying the family. Arthur roared, finally managing to tear Madison's hair free from the roller with a sickening rip. Madison let out a sharp cry, clutching her scalp, which was bleeding slightly where the gears had gripped the roots. Do you have any idea what this will do to Cole Logistics? Our stock. Your stock is no longer my concern, Arthur, I said. As of tomorrow morning, Brooks Holdings is shorting every single share of Cole Logistics we own. I suggest you call your brokers before the market opens on Monday. Though I doubt they'll be able to help you much once the SEC sees the transactions I've flagged. Arthur's face went from pale to a dark, dangerous purple. What transactions? You didn't think I only looked at Harry's Zelle history, did you? I asked, leaning against the edge of the mahogany table, looking every bit the executive in charge. Harry works as a contractor for a defense intelligence agency, yes. But his clearance level requires annual financial disclosures. Disclosures that you, Arthur, helped him falsify to hide the offshore accounts where you've been routing money from your firm's dummy marketing agencies. The room grew so quiet you could hear the water dripping from the ice bucket near the VIP lounge. Harry's breath hitched. He looked at his father, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror, one that went far beyond marital discord. This was federal territory. You're bluffing, Harry whispered. You don't have access to those files. They're classified. They were classified, I corrected him, until you used your agency-issued laptop to log into our home network while you were running your overtime sessions in this very room. Our home network, Harry, which is fully monitored by my company's IT department for security compliance, given my position. Every packet of data you transmitted while sitting on that couch, thinking I was asleep, was logged and archived. I smiled, a small, polite gesture. It turns out defense intelligence contractors are subject to the same basic cybersecurity protocols as everyone else. And when you violate those protocols by accessing unencrypted personal servers while connected to a secure corporate VPN, you tend to leave a very bright trail of breadcrumbs. The door to the boardroom didn't just open, it was bypassed. 2 men in dark, unbranded tactical windbreakers stepped into the room, followed by a woman in a tailored gray suit with a gold badge pinned to her lapel. They didn't look at Madison, who was now shivering under Arthur's jacket, nor did they look at the 50 employees gathered in the hall. Their eyes were fixed solely on Harry. Harrison Cole? The woman asked, her voice flat and metallic. Harry shivered, his hands still clutching his knees. Who are you? Special Agent Miller, Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, she said, stepping forward. She didn't offer to shake hands. We have received a report of a critical security compromise involving a Class 3 credentialed contractor. Your agency-issued terminal has flagged multiple unauthorized access attempts from an unsecured corporate network. I didn't, Harry stammered, his voice cracking. It was an accident. I was just checking my email. Mr. Cole, your terminal was used to transfer encrypted defense logistics data to an offshore server registered under the name Cole Logistics Seychelles. Agent Miller said, her eyes drilling into him. That is a direct violation of the Espionage Act, Section 793. You are under immediate administrative detention. Arthur stood up, his voice cracking with panic. Now wait just a minute. My son is a decorated contractor. This is a corporate setup. My daughter-in-law is framing him. Agent Miller didn't even look at Arthur. She gestured to the two men behind her. They moved with terrifying efficiency, pulling Harry up from the floor, forcing his arms behind his back, and clicking a pair of heavy, matte black zip ties around his wrists. "Mr. Cole, you have the right to remain silent," one of the men muttered, his voice a low drone as they began to guide Harry toward the private executive elevator. "Caroline!" Harry screamed, his face turning back toward me as they dragged him away. His eyes were wide, wet, and filled with a desperate, childlike panic. "Caroline, please. Tell them it was a mistake. I love you. I've always loved you." I didn't answer. I watched the elevator doors slide shut, cutting off his voice, cutting off his face, cutting off 6 years of my life. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, not even the hot, burning betrayal that had choked me in the lobby. There was only a clean, cold space where my marriage used to be. "Well," Victor Carmichael said, breaking the silence as he picked up his fountain pen from the table. He looked at the contract in front of him, then at my father, and finally at me. "It seems we have a draft that needs signing. And I believe the color calibration on your printer is perfectly fine, Caroline." I walked back to my seat, took my pen and sat down. "Let's begin," I said. 6 months later, the air in the conference room of my legal counsel's office was cool and tasted of expensive peppermint and old paper. I sat at the end of the long glass table, my hands clasped loosely in my lap. I was wearing a charcoal gray suit, my hair pulled back into a neat, professional low bun. No jewelry, save for a simple platinum watch my father had given me when I graduated from business school. The La Perlissette, the Zelle transfers, the tears, they felt like scenes from a movie I had watched a long time ago. Across from me sat Harry's defense attorney, a sharp-faced man named Vance who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. Beside him was Arthur Cole. Arthur had aged 10 years and 6 months. His hair was completely white, his skin sagging around his collar like loose wax. His firm, Cole Logistics, had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 3 weeks prior, following a massive sell-off by institutional investors and a series of devastating federal audits. Harry wasn't there. He was currently residing in a federal holding facility in Virginia, awaiting trial on charges of conspiracy, financial fraud, and unauthorized transmission of classified defense information. "Mrs. Cole." "Pardon me, Ms. Brooks," Vance began, adjusting his glasses. "We are here to discuss the terms of the civil settlement regarding the dissolution of your marriage to Harrison Cole, as well as the pending shareholder lawsuit filed by the remaining board members of Cole Logistics." "The terms are simple, Mr. Vance," my attorney, a senior partner named Diane, said before I could speak. "Ms. Brooks is requiring a full, uncontested divorce. She will retain the townhouse in Chelsea, the estate in upstate New York, and 100% of Harrison's remaining liquid assets, which have already been frozen by the federal court, but are subject to civil forfeiture to the victim of the marital fraud." Vance grimaced. "Ms. Brooks, Harrison has nothing left. His defense fees alone have depleted his personal accounts. If you take the real estate, he will be entirely destitute when, and if he is released, then he will be destitute," I said, my voice quiet, even and entirely devoid of malice. "He has his health, or at least whatever health the federal penal system allows him to maintain." "And what about Madison?" Arthur broke in, his voice trembling with a mixture of rage and grief. "She's in a psychiatric facility in Connecticut, Caroline. She has third-degree friction burns on her back, her scalp is permanently scarred, and she can't even look at a computer screen without having a panic attack." "You did that to her?" "No, Arthur," I said, leaning forward slightly. "Madison did that to herself when she chose to climb into a commercial printer in my executive boardroom to hide her naked body after sleeping with my husband on my birthday. I simply ordered a print job. If she had been where she was supposed to be, which was her desk in the marketing department, or perhaps her own apartment, she would have been perfectly safe." "You knew she was in there?" Arthur slammed his hand on the table. "You knew. Can you prove that, Arthur?" Diane asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Because the security logs show that Ms. Brooks was simply preparing for a high-priority meeting with a multi-billion-dollar client. The fact that your daughter was using our printing machinery as a hideout is a matter for her own legal counsel to defend during her trespassing trial." Arthur sank back into his chair, his chest heaving, his face turning that familiar, dangerous shade of purple. "We will sign," Vance said quickly, placing a hand on Arthur's arm to quiet him. "We will sign the civil settlement. But we request that Ms. Brooks agree to a non-disclosure agreement regarding the details of the events of that Friday night." "The events of that Friday night were broadcast live to 42,000 people, Mr. Vance," I said, standing up and buttoning my jacket. "The internet doesn't sign NDAs. Good luck with the trial. The wind off the East River was cold, carrying the sharp, salty tang of the Atlantic as it swept over the rooftop of the Carmichael building. I stood near the edge of the terrace, a glass of champagne in my hand, watching the lights of the Manhattan skyline twinkle like fallen stars. The music from the gallery behind me was low, a smooth, jazzy piano that blended with the distant hum of traffic. You're not wearing the lace tonight, I take it? I turned to see Victor Carmichael walking toward me, his hands thrust deep into the pockets of his cashmere overcoat. He looked relaxed, his usual sharp, corporate edge softened by the evening air. I burned it, I said, taking a small sip of my champagne. All of it. Along with the closet it was stored in. Victor laughed, a low, genuine sound. A very thorough cleaning. I respect that. He stood beside me, looking out over the water. Our first quarter numbers are up 12% since we finalized the Brooks Carmichael Logistics merger. The shareholders are calling it a masterstroke of crisis management. It wasn't crisis management, Victor, I said. It was just standard maintenance. When a machine is broken, you don't keep trying to run it. You shut it down, you clear the blockage, and you replace the parts. And Harrison? He asked quietly. His plea deal was finalized yesterday, I said. 10 years. No parole. Arthur is selling his house in the Hamptons to pay off the remaining creditors. And Madison? I don't know, I said, and for the first time in 6 years, I realized I truly didn't care. She's someone else's liability now. A bright, brilliant flash of green light illuminated the sky above the river, followed by the deep, booming thud of the first firework of the new year. The crowd in the gallery behind us cheered, clinking their glasses together as the sky erupted into a cascade of gold, silver, and red. I looked up at the colors reflecting off the glass walls of the high-rises, feeling the cold wind on my face, the clean, empty space in my chest, and the quiet, solid weight of my own feet on the ground. It was my birthday again, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I wanted to be.